Do good adaptations have to be faithful? The simple answer, yes. But we're not here for the simple answer. Let me explain. The distinction I want to make is something that's good and a good adaptation are two different things. One takes good execution. The other takes good execution and faithfulness. But what is being faithful? After taking a couple seconds to verify in the nary of diction, it means remaining loyal, steadfast, and true to the original. Now, can an adaptation be faithful if it deviates? In saying no, that will render nearly, if not every adaptation unfaithful in some way. There's no breathing room because the expectation is a one-to-one manifestation. Alternatively, in saying yes, it would require us to quantify how many and to what degree an adaptation can deviate in order to grant faithfulness. You can get pretty exact, but for the sake of my own sanity, I'll be using a ratio of 76% faithfulness to 26% minor deviations. The stipulation being that the deviations fit logically in that property. Visual time. The source material, the original, is the path. The head of Joe Pesci, for whatever reason, is the adaptation. Deviating briefly off the path is fine because you get back on track. But straying or abandoning the path is looking for a different route altogether. When an adaptation strays or abandons, it renders itself unfaithful, resulting in a bad adaptation. But is that a bad thing? Well, let's look at a few scenarios that come up, shall we? This is where the slippery slope of abandoning the original can lead. It exposes many supposed creatives as egotistical imposters, requiring another's creation to be their mouthpiece, and then pawning it off as reimagining or, well, reimagining is one way to put it. Unfortunately, this category is rife with abysmal renditions. I mean, take your pick. I'm gonna go with Halo. The showrunners sidestepped the canon, implementing the silver timeline so they could pull off this. They could have done an ODST versus Covenant conflict. Keep it simple while introducing elements from the canon. But no, the showrunners settled on trying to reach general consumers. But due to inept writing, the show ultimately relied on an odd family dynamic and a shoddy romance spurred on by hormonal freedom. But hey, at least they gave good haircuts. This isn't just good.
This is empingao. Empingao, man.
It tosses out the lore of the game, but it's to its utmost benefit. The team knew this and did an amazing dance creating multiple interesting narratives on invention, family, legacy, and more, weaving it together in a splendid array of designs, editing, performances, and music. I would love to go way more in depth, but that is for another time. The closest example I know is The Lord of the Rings by Ralph Bakshi. It stays relatively faithful to the first book and a smidge of the second. It does have deviations, some of which even influence a future rendition. Its execution, however...
Dear God.
There's more.
No.
Goodness gracious. This can be chalked up to studio interference, budget constraints, and too much material for too little runtime. And though it is bad, it isn't devoid of charm, similar to that scene in a theater play. I will say, if there's ever a live-action remake of this film, I have a perfect fan cast for these two. A property treated with respect and forged in excellence. I would think that's what most people want. My prime example is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, directed by Peter Jackson. An exhilarating score and captivating visuals that rings in the style of the books. It keeps the majority of narrative beats, shifting them around at times, but executing well. Performances are done incredibly. I could not imagine Sean Connery as Gandalf. Now, it's not a purist's ideal adaptation. It's not devoid of issues, but it is a wondrous trilogy to behold.
But allow me, travelers, to shift our gaze to a newer adaptation.
It's in the thumbnail, so it was inevitable. Is The Last of Us a good adaptation? This won't be a full-blown analysis, but my slim review is: the introduction of the cordyceps was great. A good chunk of the visuals were awesome, and some of the performances were really solid. Now, with that out of the way, the showrunner's excursionist method in storytelling did not gel with how many episodes they had. Joel and Ellie's dynamic in this apocalyptic fungi fusion was the one to get right, but the care for them wasn't as strong as the showrunner's care for filler, causing the main relationship to have awkward pacing. The showrunners even forgot elements they had introduced about the infected. Heck, they just plain forgot about the infected. What's the need for a cure if the mushroom-flavored peeps aren't a looming threat? It's also a huge blunder that the show struggles to make the Fireflies competent, even though the writers had plenty of time to correct this. It results in an ending where you don't have any qualms with Joel's decisions versus the Fireflies' aspirations. To address the question earlier, no. But before I close things out, I want to bring up a more exact method for attributing faithfulness. It would start off by observing the source material and figure out what works and what doesn't. Whatever that ratio is, you then project that onto the adaptation, and if desired, you can add a buffer. However close the adaptation's content is to what works, grants it faithfulness. This is also where an adaptation can shine, since it can take the original's shortcomings, improve on them, and incorporate it in a way that makes sense. Only issue with using this method of observation is it takes time.